Oh, hey YouTube, look at these backs, they're huge. The pumps must be great, they must be coming in the gym day and night just like I was. What up, homies? It's the Tominator back with another one. So this time I wanted to do a video that's long overdue, and yeah, we're talking about the best back ever, alright? So this topic's already been covered to death, I know, but I thought I'd share my 2 cents anyway and break it down for you at a more detailed level, alright? So if you aren't aware, I've already done videos on the best lat spread and best back double bicep pose of all time. So check out those after this if you haven't already. I'll put a link to them somewhere. But an important distinction between those videos and this one is that there, we're talking about the body as a whole. Here, we're focused solely on the back. No arms, no glutes or hamstrings, just lats, traps, and lower back, okay? And with that said, there's 3 bodybuilders that come to mind as front runners for the very best backs in history, so you're looking at them right here. And this seems to be more or less the consensus in bodybuilding circles. And of course, we're talking about Ronnie Coleman, Dorian Yates, and Joel Stubbs. Now, obviously, there's been a ton of other great backs throughout history as well, like Lee Haney, Samir Bannout, Momo Benaziza, Flex Wheeler, Jean-Pierre Fuchs, Johnny Jackson, Jay Cutler, and nowadays we got Kai Green and Phil Heath, right? Just to name a few. But none of these guys can truly match the combination of width, thickness, detail, and just overall development that these 3 guys in the picture are bringing. So sure, guys like Phil or Flex might actually have better detail and more of a 3D effect, but they're severely lacking in width. And guys like Jay or Big Ramy might be big as Boeing 747s, but they're missing the detail and lower back density. And of course, even the best backs of the 70s and 80s, great as Schwarzenegger and Haney and Bannout may have been, they simply can't hang with this level of mass you're seeing here. But anyway, let's jump into it and take a closer look at these 3 behemoths. So first up, there's Joel Stubbs. I want to get him out of the way now because, quite frankly, I think he's overhyped and that his comparisons to Dorian and Ronnie aren't quite justified. Yes, he is wide as fuck, and those are some of the most dang ridiculously overgrown lats you'll ever see. Okay, that's true. And you can certainly find pictures of the dude looking like a freaking alien, like this one right here. Honestly, I'm not even sure this isn't Photoshop because those lats look literally unbelievable. So forgive me if it is, but I think this is the real deal and that this guy's back is really just that retardedly overdeveloped. But that said, these are gym pictures, guys. Anybody can look great in the gym or photo shoots with flattering lighting. I mean, just go watch Dennis James in his training videos. The guy looked better than Mr. Olympia. Yet you put him on stage and he wilts. And it's the same thing with Joel Stubbs. So this is where he kind of drops the ball here, in my opinion. So here we can see him in contest shape. And yes, that back is still looking mighty impressive. The lats are legit and just hanging there off him like big old slabs of meat. And it certainly doesn't take a trained eye to tell he's crushing this punk standing next to him. So not much to complain about yet, but let's check out some real poses. So here in the rear lat spread, again, he's looking pretty great actually. Just dwarfing these fools next to him, making them look like his children. So yeah, it looks like maybe Stubbs does have what it takes to hang with the likes of Yates and Coleman after all. But then again, here he is in 2009 at his one and only Olympia appearance, and that should be kind of ringing, red alarm bells or whatever, warning lights in your head. Okay, it would be so great. Why did he only compete at the Olympia once? He's looking decidedly less awe-inspiring in any case now. So granted, this doesn't appear to be his best showing as we just saw him looking better in the other pictures, but it's still some of the only photos you can find of this dude in contest shape. And to me, that's the real measure of a bodybuilder, is when you actually see them on stage, dieted down, under those bright lights. And when you compare him to an average, not even particularly good photo of Dorian in the same pose, I think it's clear who comes out ahead. Yates not only looks much wider, he also looks harder and drier. And next to Ronnie, it's not even close either, he just pales in comparison. So the guy on the right, Ronnie's like a 14-karat gold watch with big old sparkling diamonds in it, and Joel there on the left is like that fake Rolex you get from Chinatown. I mean, it looks close at first glance, but upon further inspection, the difference in quality becomes quite evident. And in the back double bicep, this is where things really fall apart for the guy. Now, this is from the same show where he looked so impressive in the rear relaxed pose and back lat spread a minute ago, but in this position, for some reason, he suddenly begins to look thoroughly mediocre. And this becomes obvious as soon as we put him up next to Yates. Look at the difference in detail and hardness here. Dorian's back looks like it's been chiseled out of stone, whereas Joel's is more like it's been sculpted out of jello, okay? Now, sure, you can argue that he just came in off, maybe, and he isn't at his best, so it's not fair to put him up against a 1995 Dorian Yates in peak condition. Okay, fine, but then find me a picture of the guy hitting a better back double bicep on stage. So like I said, it's hard to come by actual competition photos of Stubbs because he competed so rarely, and when he did, it was usually only in lower level shows where pictures might not be available. And even if there is a better one floating around out there somewhere, I sincerely doubt it can outdo this one of Yates. Likewise, he gets his ass handed to him by Big Ron. Joel might even be a little wider here, but it doesn't matter because the difference in thickness and detail is so jarringly vast. I mean, this is men versus boys. It's just not even close. So really, that's the deal with Stubbs. He's great, but honestly, I don't think he deserves to be mentioned in the same breath as two guys who won 14 Sandows between them. Still, one of the biggest and best backs ever, no doubt. I mean, you could argue top 3 still, conceivably, although I personally wouldn't after seeing how lackluster he just looked in that back double bicep. I think after seeing that, to place him above guys like Kai and Phil and Haney, and most of these top Olympia competitors for that matter, is downright insulting. So, really, these two are a cut above. They're essentially playing in a league of their own. I mean, just consider how easy it would be to name the best back of all time if only one of them ever existed. Like, if there were no Ronnie, everyone would agree it's Dorian. And on the flip side, if there were no Dorian, Ronnie would be the automatic number 1. But since we were lucky enough to have both, we've got a great head-to-head battle on our hands. So, let's break it down, pose for pose, in the usual fashion, and see who comes out on top. First, I want to show you them in the rear relaxed position. While it's not a mandatory pose, it's still a really good indicator of overall back development, and here we can see 2 of the best to ever hit it. On the one hand, Dorian is wide as a friggin' barn door, and again, he looks like he's carved out of marble. That back is probably the most dense in history, so even when he's far from his best like he was here in '97, he still looks incredible from the rear. But then again, what have we here? I mean, what is going on over there with Ronnie? A Christmas tree in the rear relaxed pose, man? Are you kidding me? So that is almost unheard of, and I would have thought it pretty much anatomically impossible to exhibit such crispness in the lumbar region while standing in this position. I mean, he's not even really retracting his elbows that far, so how is he even contracting it to that degree? It's a mystery, man, but for that reason, even though Dorian's is epic in its own right, I have to say that Ronnie's back looks even more impressive here. But either way, I wouldn't fault you for choosing Yates because he is displaying more width and hardness, and those traps are insane. So it's a tough call on this one, but that Xmas tree really kind of pulls my eye, and I gotta give it to Ronnie for that alone. Here we see both guys bringing one of their larger versions to the stage. In Ronnie's case, this was his biggest, as he weighed in at an alleged 297 pounds here at the 2004 Mr. Olympia. Now, I've heard that this was exaggerated, but either way, the guy was the very epitome of a mass monster, looking like a damn mutant up there. So he's really left humanity behind at this point. And not sure what show this was from for Dorian, but based on his size, I would say definitely later in his career, maybe '97. And might have been a guest posing even, as he's looking a little soft and uncharacteristically watery. Now, both guys have monstrous backs, but again, I don't know about you, Ronnie's just kind of draws my eye a little more. Now, you can definitely argue it's because his picture's clearer and better quality, and Dorian's is also taken from a slight angle, so that's going to make him look a little smaller. But you know what? Either way, the difference is pretty negligible when it comes to the back, because both guys are totally killing it in this pose. Overall, between these two comparisons, I'd give Ronnie a slight edge so far, but it really doesn't mean a whole heck of a lot, since we haven't even got into the real poses yet. So let's proceed. Okay, and this next one, again, technically isn't an official pose, but it's what I like to call the Christmas tree pose, where they're pulling back their elbows to showcase the lower lat and spinal erector development. And in this one, Yates is the king, okay? Nobody can match him in this pose, with the possible exception of one man, perhaps, in Samir Banu, who also had a sick Christmas tree. But certainly Ronnie doesn't beat him here. And I mean, this version of Ronnie Coleman is probably his all-time most conditioned in 1998. Yet he still looks a little smooth next to them jagged teeth of Dorian's lower lats, right? Now, you can find the same picture of Ronnie online looking sharper, but that's because filters have been applied. So one thing I try to do whenever I'm making these comparisons is to use the original and unaltered pictures to get a sense of how the guys really looked, as opposed to how the magazines and supplement companies are trying to market them to us. But anyway, here again, you can see the superiority of Dorian. So Ronnie looks tremendous as well. Don't get me wrong, these are both world-class lower backs. It's just Dorian's is sharper and more well-defined, so that's why he wins it. I mean, his is just a perfect Christmas tree shape, whereas Ronnie's is more like an hourglass or something. It looks a little funny to me, but either way, still amazing stuff from both of them. Alright, but how about an actual mandatory? Here we have them in a rear lat spread at arguably their biggest and best. Dorian once again in '95 and Ronnie in '03. And you know what? I'm actually leaning towards Dorian here. So not only does his back appear a little wider, he's also showing a bit more detail through the middle as well. And let's get one thing straight though, Ronnie was unquestionably bigger than him here, as Dorian never weighed 287 pounds on stage. But he doesn't really look like it in this comparison, and I chalk that up mainly to posing. Now, this is the deal, and the advantage that Dorian had over Ronnie was that in general he was a better poser, so he could hit poses, especially the lat spreads and the side tricep, for example, more effectively than his counterpart. One mistake that Ronnie sometimes tended to make was that he leans forward too much and rounds his back, giving him that hunchback appearance, and this also causes his width to suffer slightly and his lower back detail to fade, so that's exactly what's going on here, and that's why Dorian looks better. I really think if Ronnie was hitting the pose the same way, then the tables would turn, but since he's not, I gotta go with what we're given to look at, right? And so Dorian takes this one. Still not by a large margin by any means, because Ronnie's traps look quite a bit thicker, especially in that upper region around the neck, so he does score some points for that, but I don't think it's enough. Alright, but how about this one though? I mean, here we have probably the best picture you can find of either guy in this pose, and not surprisingly, these are both photo shoot pics. So you see what I was saying earlier with that point about Joel Stubbs? I mean, guys always look better in photo shoots, trust me. But anyway, in this one now, look at that, man. Ronnie's got a freaking Christmas tree growing out of them trunks. So this is once again a baffling anomaly, just a true freak of nature, as it's almost unheard of to sport one of those in a lat spread. I know I've seen the occasional picture of Dexter Jackson and Victor Martinez doing it as well, but never to this extent. So in certain years, most notably in 2001 and in 1999 as we see here, Ronnie was able to pull this off. Now Dorian, it has to be said, looks amazing as well, right? But Ronnie's back in this shot is just untouchable if you ask me. I invite you to find a picture of any bodybuilder in history looking more impressive in a rear lat spread than what we see right here. So to me, this is the pinnacle, whether we're talking about the back alone or the pose as a whole. Dorian is probably a safe bet for number 2, but no way does he beat this. Ronnie's traps are just popping out at you. The lower traps are pretty close, but his upper traps are undeniably superior. The lats look essentially identical, except Ronnie's are more symmetrical. And of course his lower back is from another planet and just trounces Yates. So yeah, even if you're a die-hard Dorian fan, I don't see how you can say his back looks better in this comparison, or in any other picture you can find of him for that matter. I'd be surprised if you can find one that looks better than this here of Ronnie, but now I know what some of you are thinking right now. But Tom, you said you don't put much stock in photo shoot pictures, yet here you are praising Ronnie for how great he looks in a photo shoot. And that's true, you're right. But to prove it's no fluke, and I'm not a hypocrite, here he is in 2 different shows, once again displaying that supernatural lower back in the lat spread. So this one on the left is from the 2001 New Zealand Pro, and the one on the right is from the 1999 Mr. Olympia. So just epic stuff from him. But one more, just for fun in the gym, and like I said, I don't put much value in photos like this, but it's still interesting to see how they measure up in more favorable everyday lighting conditions. And the way I would sum this one up is that Dorian looks more massive and freaky, but Ronnie looks more shapely and symmetrical. Which is odd, right? Because Ronnie in his later years would grow infamous for his lat asymmetry with the one lat, quote-unquote, melting. But back in his heyday, the symmetry was on point. So nothing wrong about this. Hell, he looks positively aesthetic, at least as far as mass monsters are concerned. The waist is tight and that V-taper is glorious. But you could say the same for Dorian too. It's just, Dorian's back has more of that kind of tumorous look to it, you might say. At least in this picture here. It's still extremely good, but overall, I gotta say Ronnie's back looks more pleasing to the eye and is just better in the lat spread. At least that is in the rear lat spread, because from the front, different story. It's Yates all day, he owns this pose and absolutely dominates. Now, originally I wasn't even going to include a front lat spread, because after all, we're talking about the back, and the best way to view the back is, of course, from the back. But nonetheless, I decided to throw it in here for completeness sake, because I know someone would complain otherwise, since this is, after all, a position where Dorian clearly comes out on top. I mean, just look how awkward Ronnie looks here with his shoulders shrugged and his neck all scrunched up like that. I've heard people say he looks like a frog in this pose, and I kind of see where they're coming from. But let's not forget, we're only talking about the back here, not the pose as a whole. So all we should be focused on from this angle is the lats, that's it. And in that respect, it's actually pretty dang close. For those of you who hate the way he hits it, by the way, he didn't always look so silly. As we can see here back when he won his first Mr. Olympia, those lats look incredible, but I still have to say that Dorian's look even better. His width is just astronomical in this pose, and even Big Ron can't quite seem to match it. In the gym once again, and it's hella close this time. Overall, I actually like this pick of Ronnie much more though, as his chest looks 100 times more impressive, as do his striated delts and arms. But since we're just talking about the lats, I gotta probably give the edge to the guy on the left once again. So for what it's worth, Dorian comes out on top in the front lat spread. Turning around again, we come to the final pose in this comparison, the back double bi. And surprise, surprise, looks like we got another battle on our hands, because both guys look incredible. Yet they both bring very different things to the table, don't they? On the one hand, Dorian's hardness, dryness, graininess, whatever you want to call it, is unsurpassed. Nobody has that granite-hard muscle like he does. But on the other hand, Ronnie's back has more pop to it, if you will. It's got more of that Phil Heath 3D effect going on we've all come to know and love these days. His traps look like they're sticking out further, creating deeper grooves and crevices throughout that upper back. But then again, Dorian's lower traps are wider and his lower back appears sharper as well. But back to what I was saying about that added pop to Coleman's back, I mean, this is partly due to the lighting being brighter, but it's also just an inherent qualitative difference in these two physiques. So Ronnie's always had rounder, fuller muscle bellies, whereas Dorian's always been harder and drier, but also flatter. And while that distinction is more noticeable in, say, the biceps and triceps, it still holds true for the back as well. So in this one, as outstanding as Dorian's back is, I gotta go with Ronnie for that eye-catching factor, the size and thickness. Now let's take a look at both guys when they ushered in a new era of mass, respectively. So yeah, we're talking about Dorian in 1993 and Ronnie 10 years later in 2003. The size difference is obvious and to be expected, but then again, Dorian definitely has him beat on definition, though both guys have size and conditioning to spare, really. I gotta say, Ronnie's back is simply too much for him here, though, as the thickness and density, it's unreal, man. It's just like muscles on top of muscles. It honestly looks like something a comic book artist might come up with, not a real human being in the flesh. So for that reason, I gotta go with Big Ron here. But let's see Dorian at his best. So here he is in the famous 1996 British Grand Prix where he looked absolutely immortal. Okay, I can't really think of a better way to describe it than godlike. So I actually just remembered this show at the last minute because originally I was going to say that no way can any version of Dorian ever beat this shot of Ronnie in the back double bicep. But now that I put them side by side, I've changed my mind. So what's right is right, and Dorian's back does indeed look better here, even than Ronnie's. However, I would still maintain that the majority of the time, Ronnie's back looks better in this pose. So it's often really super close, but generally speaking, it just looks more thickly developed. So despite Yates winning this round, I give the pose to Ronnie. So that's the video, guys. And just to recap, Ronnie had a slight win in the rear relaxed. Dorian had a big win in the Christmas tree pose. Ronnie had another win in the rear lat spread. Dorian took the front lat spread. And finally, Ronnie wins the back double bicep. So that's 3 poses to 2 for Big Ron. And even though Dorian won big in 2 poses, the bottom line is this. I feel like Dorian was definitely the more consistent bodybuilder throughout his career, okay? He almost never came in off, whereas Ronnie would be this unstoppable juggernaut one year and then falter the next. So you never knew what to expect with him, whereas with Dorian you were pretty much guaranteed rock-solid conditioning. So if we're comparing them on average, probably you've got to give the title of best back to Dorian. But if we're taking both guys at their very best and pitting them up against the best versions of each other, then I'd say Ronnie comes out on top more often than not. Now look, it'd be so easy to play it safe and just give them a tie because you can make a strong case for either guy depending on the show, the year, and the particular picture, right? But that'd just be taking the pussy approach, and that's not what this channel's about. So I try to always keep it real with you guys and give my honest opinion, even if that means ruffling a few feathers here and there and racking up a bunch of dislikes, well, so be it. So that's what it is, guys. Ronnie Coleman, best back of all time. Dorian Yates, a very close second. Please share your thoughts in the comments below and feel free to leave a like and subscribe for more if you enjoyed. Until next time, playa, I'm the Tominator, signing off, and I'll be back.